Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to season 2 of Conversations in Pop Culture, where I have with me the bubblegum princess and sometimes Detective Cookie Dough, professional wrestler Alexia Nicole. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am very excited because you have been killing it as of lately. I think all of 2019, a little bit into 2020, and 2021 is going, I think, the right direction as soon as you're allowed to wrestle again and everything that's going on. And so I do want to talk a little bit about 2019, but there's a bunch of other stuff I want to talk about first. And I think the best place to start is, how did you get into professional wrestling?
I was just always a fan. I was watching on TV. My brother, he's 10 years older, so he would babysit me, and he would watch, so I'd sit in the background and watch, and that's just, as he slowly got out of it, I got more and more into it, and one day I just decided, I'm like, I want to try it. It looks like fun. So Googled schools in the area, found where I trained at, Squared Circle Training, and that's how it started.
And so what was that like? Because obviously you're still fairly new to the industry and coming in, and obviously, the women's revolution in wrestling didn't happen at this point. It was sort of starting to, I think, heat up. And so what was your training like, being both on the physical side and the mental side and even the psychological side of wrestling?
Yeah, like when I started training in 2011, so in terms of like indie wrestling and like other like Impact, there was women wrestling was starting to become a huge deal, but WWE, it was just very like 6 diva tag matches for like 2 minutes long. So training wise, I mean, I'm so lucky. I had Taylor Wilde train me, and Rob Fuego, he was the head trainer at Squared. Always super helpful. They didn't sort of pigeonhole me into this, you're a girl, you do this. They were very supportive, and they wanted me to be good. They wanted all the girls to be good and just show that they can actually work. So that was great. And like no one ever put me down for being a small teenage girl. Everyone was helpful. They wanted to help. Everyone was very helpful there. I'm really appreciative of that. In terms of like starting to wrestle, I think I was 2013. I had started actually working on shows. I was 17-ish. It was hard because there was still 5-minute matches. It was go out there and do something cute. You don't have to try and do something fancy. Just be cute. Doesn't matter what you do. Nobody really cares. So yeah, that's how it was when I started. It's come a long way, thankfully. But that was what it was like when I first started wrestling.
And so to even talk a little bit about your training, because obviously a lot of people know who Taylor Wilde is. And obviously she sort of tore it up in Impact for a while and got a lot of, clout, and really sort of changed what Impact was doing. And Impact Wrestling as a whole was sort of the first evolution, I feel like, with women's wrestling on the mainstream, because they had a knockouts division versus a divas division, which I think is a much better name for it.
Yes.
And obviously
much
now
better.
It's much better. It sort of sounds more of a fight promotion type thing,
Yeah.
versus a sex appeal type thing. And so, what was that training like? Because obviously, you're so close with her in a lot of ways, according to Instagram.
Yeah, we still talk. We keep up. It was good. Like, she was so helpful, super good at teaching us the basics, and like really helped us with being a girl in wrestling, because it's not the same as being a guy. Your body works differently. You don't get the same opportunities. Sometimes you get better opportunities, but like everything's different. As even though we're all wrestlers, it's still different to be a guy and a girl. And she really helped. Like, this is how you do things. This is how you approach people. Don't be afraid to say yes or to say no. She was super helpful in that regard. Like, she still is. Like, she's still like my mama bear. She still gets on me to do certain things. I can still go to her for advice all the time. But yeah, like, so helpful. Especially being a woman, giving us that advice, telling us things, to avoid, things to do, just everything related to, being a girl, how to keep yourself safe, how to protect others, everything like that.
And then obviously, even going off of this, I mean, there's maybe 9 or 10 women that have made your entire career in so many ways. And I want to talk about them because I think that they're super interesting. And the first one I want to talk about is Jasmine, who is Aaliyah.
Yes.
In right now NXT. And obviously the two of you have tore it up. I think she was one of the first matches that you crossed the border into the States in with as well. And the two of you have tagged, you've gone against each other, you've gone through Absolutely Insane Wrestling, I think PWA, I want to say, and there's so many other things. So obviously, and also facing, I think you guys are part of Team Barely Legal.
Yes, we've done everything together. We started training on the same day. We've wrestled each other so many times. We would have matches. We didn't even have to like talk about anything beforehand. We knew what we were doing. We got each other. Whenever we wanted to try something new, we knew how we both moved, so it was easy. I mean, we've traveled together, teamed together, wrestled each other. I'm so proud of her and everything she's done. I'm so proud of her. She's worked so hard, and to see her actually getting a lot of TV time lately has made me really happy. And she's super sweet, and like she works really hard. So I love her. Can't say enough good things about her. She was like my first friend in wrestling, and she'll always be one of my best friends.
And so what is that like? Because obviously, I mean, this rivalry, in my opinion, ended short in a lot of ways. But what was that like, wrestling somebody, tagging with them, and having all of these experiences with a person, and then them to be up on a very big stage, and also saying, hey, I was sort of wrestling them first and really building myself out, and both of us were going at it, and having those early matches, because it is very important, to have that type of experience, and also see people coming out of, where you came out of, being able to get onto that big stage, because it sort of proves the path in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like definitely having her, because she's a couple years older than me, so she got to start wrestling a little bit before me. I had gotten injured, so she got to keep sort of working as I sat and watched, but she was so helpful once I started wrestling again, just helping me come out of my shell, be more comfortable. I was super shy when I started, and she's super not shy. So she was really good at helping me be more comfortable with just being out there and being loud, and really just like showing everybody who I am. And yeah, like to have her, like to start from the same place and see how far she's come, it does show that it's possible, because like, especially with Canadian wrestling, it's so hard to gain exposure in Canada. So to see someone just start from the exact same place and see them get all the way to where she is, it is really like, it's a good morale booster. It makes you feel like this is possible.
And so even to go off of that point, because now I'm curious in my mind, like Velcro here. So what is it about Canada? Because in the States, there are certain territories. So the New England circuit is very big, where you could have an entire career and not ever have to leave New England. And then same thing with the New York area. There's basically a huge circuit in the New York area. So what is Canada like as far as wrestling goes, and even exposure? Because it's probably different in a lot of ways. And I'm not as familiar with Canada. I know you guys have like, what, 5 like territories sort of, or 5, states sort of thing?
Yeah, like there's, I think 12, God, I don't even know how many. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Quebec, Ontario, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland. Yeah, I think there's 10. I might have honestly forgotten a province, but I'm pretty sure there's 10 provinces and 3 territories. And there's really only, in terms of wrestling, there's really only like 4 major like territories. There's out west with BC. Ontario's a big one. Quebec's a big one. And the East Coast. So all the New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, PEI, the islands, basically. And that's really it. And there's a lot. Canada is very large, and there's not a lot in between, to be honest. I can drive 8 hours north of my house and to get to like a big show, and there'll be nothing in between. Just a straight drive of like trees and like land. So there's already not a lot of wrestling. The wrestling we have is great, but there's just not as much of it. And it's not like, a lot of American indie wrestling's on like IWTV. There's a lot of streaming services to watch American indie wrestling. A lot of Canadian promotions just haven't broken through that barrier and gotten on there. Like there are a few, like C4, Alpha One, Femme Fatale, Kaizen Pro. Like there are a few promotions that have gotten to like that level of being streamed, and like people can just watch them at any time, but it's just not the same, and there's not as many.
So obviously, I mean, IWTV can only expand so much in a year, and obviously there's other promotions, like I think Title Network, and then there's a few others. But obviously, when you have less promotions, and then also going into a whole nother country with marketing rights and all sorts of stuff, and film rights and international rights, it becomes very big of a headache. That's why there are some things on Netflix that you can only get in Canada.
Yes.
And it's a whole problem. Yeah. That's why you need ExpressVPN there. And I know they're not a sponsor. I wish they were, because this would be a perfect segue right into my sponsorship right there. I'm going to go send them this thing. Be like, hey, guys, I could sneak it right in. But obviously, Aaliyah gets signed, Jasmine gets signed, and then you started also, while this was all going on, having a feud with Beautiful Bia.
Yes.
And this is an insane rivalry that pretty much ended, I think, like 18 months ago, to be exact, so far. And it surrounds the PWA Elite Women's title, which I think was one of your first matches. And then you basically went through almost all these promotions, like Steel City Pro, and a variety of other things. So what was this like facing her? Because I think you faced her like 35 to 40 times in your 100-match career, by
the way. In terms of matches, I think I wrestled Bia probably more than anyone, especially early on in my career, just because at that point there were so few girls. Like, there's only in Ontario alone, I can think of maybe 13 girls max, and there's a lot of wrestlers in Ontario. But there's only 13 girls now, and even at that time, there was even less. It was like me, I think it was me, Bia, Spinelli, Courtney Rush. I honestly can't even remember who else. Like, there was so few that we were just wrestling each other all the time. And it was a really good way for me to learn how to work with someone who I hadn't trained with. Because when I was wrestling Aaliyah, we trained together, we knew each other. It was really easy. Working with Bia was different because we didn't train together. We didn't really know each other all that well until we started working together so often. But we built up that chemistry, and like, I love Bia. I know she was injured before. I'm not sure if she's coming back to wrestling or not, but she's someone who's improved tremendously, and like, she's so tough. I watched this girl get put through tables, get her face busted open. She's so incredibly tough, and she'll just do dives and just throw herself. Like, I couldn't do that. So good on you.
So to even talk about that, because obviously you're wrestling somebody who is constantly improving, and you're wrestling them the most out of anybody you wrestled, and you're having matches against each other over and over, and obviously the PWA title was involved, and a variety of other things were involved. And so what was that like? Because after a while, and we see this with WWE, where they're doing the same match over and over again, it gets stale. And also, there's a whole thing where now you know your opponent. How did you pull something out above them, or trick them up or mess them up, or even the ability to experiment? Because if you know your opponent so well, and it's the 11th time you wrestled with them, you know they could take a suplex. But the question becomes, how are they going to handle if you put them in a weird new thing that you're working on, and they're dealing with that and seeing if it works, especially when there were fans in the crowd. So what was that like? A lot of, it gives a lot of opportunity in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, it was, I had actually, because we had gotten to that point, like, we were a few matches in, I'm like, this feels really stale. Like, I feel like we're just doing the same thing over and over again. What I had done is I had asked the promoter of PWA, because I was a babyface at the time, we both were. We were just having matches, just like real competitive matches. So I asked him, like, can I turn heel? Like, no one will see it coming. It'll just be something fresh, something new, something to just try, just to change it up. And it worked so well, especially with her, because she's such a good baby face. Like, it's so hard to be a good baby face. It is really hard. And she just did it so naturally. So I came in as a heel, and just turned things up so much. It worked so well. And it made trying new things easier, because I got to kind of control her, show her what I was trying to do. And then if she had something new she wanted to try, it didn't, we didn't have to pretend to be friendly the whole time. She could just be like, okay, screw it. I'm just going to grab you for something because I hate you, you hate me. And it really added another level to all our matches. So I'm really thankful, actually, that I was just like, hey, can I just change everything I'm doing? And they were totally okay with it. So that was good.
What is it like to be a heel? Because obviously I love heels. So used to be when you're like, 12, 13, 15 watching wrestling, you're like, I love the baby faces. And those are the, guys. But then I'm watching the John Cena Edge feud is when I really came into wrestling heavily. And it was this entire circumstance where I'm like, I like Edge a lot more in a lot of ways. Because it's like, he's the one who's using a chair. He's the one who's clearly being sexual. He's not, and nothing against John Cena, because John Cena was great in that feud as well. But it's the idea that you're like, oh, man, I kind of like the bad guy. And I'm a big comic book fan. And I like the bad guys more. Mm-hmm. The Joker to me is a lot more interesting than Batman. Lex Luthor is a lot more interesting than Superman. So
Yeah,
that's how.
I feel it.
So what
um,
was that like to really play on that? Because I feel there's more character development with a heel than with a baby face.
yeah, and like it is so much more fun to be a heel. It's so much more fun to like be mean. I don't know why. It's just fun to be super mean to someone and like the fans and everything like that. It's just and it helps calm your nerves in a weird way, at least for me. Like it helps me calm down, collect myself because I don't have to worry about like, oh my god, they're not cheering for me. How do I get them to cheer for me? I can just focus on being a bad guy because if they boo, hey, I'm doing my job. If they cheer, I mean, I guess I'm not doing my job, but I'm going to keep trying. But yeah, I find it a lot easier to be a heel. It comes something more natural to me. I don't like putting on a fake smile and being happy and cheery and all that. So when I was a baby face, that was definitely something I had a problem with because I felt like I had to be this happy, bubbly girl, even when I didn't necessarily know how to do it or feel like doing it. Um, but being a heel, I didn't have to do that. So it was just a natural feeling of like, okay, I can be mean now. I don't have to pretend to be this cute, bubbly girl that's just gonna, hey guys, cheer for me, clap for me. Um, I could be aggressive, and it was good because I felt like my best in ring work is when I'm more aggressive. So that really helped me in terms of actually like working as well.
And I love heels, and I think heels are great, and I think that it's so much more interesting when the heel goes, and then how the heel acts and all that stuff. And I also feel like if a heel loses a match and then they like just like take the ring, mic, and all that stuff, there's just so much stuff that can be done. I don't know if you know who Killian McMurphy is
Yes.
or MJF.
Yeah.
Killian McMurphy and MJF are very similar, where Killian will just yell at people at his merch table. And it's the greatest thing. And MJF will do the same thing, apparently, I heard on the Indies. And so it's this great idea that heels can do that. But I do want to talk about another woman, and that's Alexandra Vale.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that you also were teaming up a lot and going up against each other, and obviously had all these crazy matches. I know Casey was involved in a bunch of those matches, and that's just been on and off indefinitely as well. And that's another woman that obviously you had a lot facing with, and I think Courtney Rush was involved, and a bunch of other people were involved as well. So what was that like to have that stuff going on? And then there's also a really cool match in Ring of Honor.
It was fun. Bale, Spinelli, Rush, like they were all sort of like a generation ahead of me in terms of like how long they'd been wrestling. So as soon as I started working with Sandra, it was cool because it was someone who had way more experience, who was super comfortable in everything she was doing, someone who could really take me by the hand and guide me because I was still super new and like really young and unsure of myself. But she knew what she could do well. She knew what I could do, and she had no problem just like putting something together, getting my input, putting it all together, and having fun matches, and like even traveling together. Like she's someone I would travel with to like do like 4 or 5 hour drives with. Super fun to travel with, fun to work with. Always had new ideas, which was really nice. But yeah, she was
And
really
then
fun to
also
work.
about the Ring of Honor match, it was
Yeah.
Jenny and Neil Dashwood, which I don't understand how WWE didn't figure out how to use her. That's like my biggest question mark about WWE. In the last 3 years, I have no idea how you not know how to use Emma and Tennille because she's killing it right now.
Mm-hmm.
And that match was crazy. It's obviously Ring of Honor. It's a New Japan like combination show that they're both hosting. It's I think in the States, as far as
No,
I know.
that show was here. It was in Toronto.
Oh, it was in Toronto.
Yeah.
Wow. See, I get mixed up too. So, what was that like though? Because it's still two huge companies that are, I think it's fair to say, sort of, they're weird because they're not independent companies, but they're also not, WWE and AEW companies
Yeah.
either. They're sort of caught in the middle, but everybody knows both those companies and respects them. So, what was that like getting to wrestle on those shows? Because a lot of people were watching those shows.
It was insane. That was like the first major show I think I'd ever wrestled on. Every year they do like a War of the Worlds tour. Well, they'll do a stop in Toronto. So the year before I had been a manager on the show. So I got I got a taste of what it was like. And then the next year they called me. They're like, hey, we have this spot. Would you like it? I immediately said yes. Like, please sign me up. I'll take it. Got there, found out I was teaming with Bale and we were facing Jenny Rose and Tennille. And I mean, I remember at the time I was so nervous and like that I was worried that things wouldn't go right. And I remember like we had the match, and I was just like, oh, that wasn't as good as it could have been. I was so down on myself. Looking back, it's a pretty good match. I had no reason to be so upset. But it was such a good experience. It was so good to learn from both Jenny and Tennille, because they have done things that I've never done. So good to learn from them. Just good experience to wrestle people that I have never even met before and never sort of crossed paths with. And yeah, just a really like an overall good experience, good learning experience, had fun. Yeah, I really can't say how much fun it was.
So to even go off of that, because you mentioned something that like you didn't think it was a good match,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously looking back, you know, you're like, oh, it was a pretty good match. So what is that like? Because I'm extremely hard on myself on a lot of stuff. You know, obviously I do a lot of public speaking, I do a lot of presentations, I do a lot of interviews every single week, and I'm always saying, oh man, that was bad. And especially when I used to do pre-recorded stuff and I edit it, and sometimes I would postpone editing something like this was a disaster of an interview, and then I'm editing it and it's not so bad. So what is that like of being critical of yourself and understanding, saying, hey, you know, because obviously you want to break down a match, you want to say, okay, you know, I could have done this better, but also you can be very, very hard on yourself in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
and I do it too. So what is that like? Because it is complicated.
Yeah, I'm super hard on myself. There was a while where I wouldn't watch my matches back because I didn't want to see it. I'm like, if I felt it went good, I'm like, great, leave it at that. I don't want to know if it didn't go good. If I felt it was bad, I didn't want to see it because it was bad. It was honestly, it's not till like I'd say like late 2018, 2019 when I really started watching all my matches back, looking at what I was doing, and it's hard because it's weird to watch yourself. It's very weird to watch yourself.
Oh, it's so weird. It's so weird. I hate the sound of my own voice. Like, oh man. So this is a funny story. So I'm on a date with a girl, and like the date almost failed because she wanted to play like the interview, and I almost had to like walk down. I was like, I'm done. Like, because I hate hearing the sound of my own voice. I hate it. I hate when people listen to it. It's the worst thing ever. But yeah, I know the exact feeling of hearing yourself, watching yourself, because I instantly recall like the situation. It's horrific. Yeah,
because when you're watching yourself, you're not just watching objectively. You're thinking back to whatever that day was, whatever was happening, and that's how I am, at least. So like I've started watching myself back, and it's helped tremendously. Like I can see what I do well now, and I can see things that I needed to improve on. But I never get over the feeling of it being weird. Like, for example, like Backyard Pro, we've been having like every week we have our live shows on YouTube, and I feel every time, and I've filmed these like months in advance, and every time I feel so weird sitting there watching it, and I've seen it already. Like I've seen this stuff. I know what's about to happen, and I feel so weird sitting there watching it. Even the intro, like I'm in it for 2 seconds. I'm like, oh, why am I doing that? Why did I do that? Why did I wear that?
We're going to talk about Backyard Pro too, but I do want to talk about, I think, three more women before we get to 2019, which is your breakout year, and obviously Casey Spinelli. I do like Recess. I'm just going to let it at that. So I don't know if that's a Canadian show or where that was made, but Cokie Smurf's in that show and plays Spinelli. And if you don't know who Cokie Smurf is, it's an inside joke, and somebody who sees this is going to instantly get that joke. So, but how did this rivalry start between the two of you? Because there's been everything involved in this.
Yeah. I think it was just like when did it start? I honestly couldn't tell you when it started. It might have been at PWA was the first time we wrestled.
I think like one of the matches, I think Victoria was in and Cat Power was in. And
okay. Crazy. Yeah, and that was cool.
That's one of those things. And I heard that she is phenomenal on the indie scene. And AG wrestled her. And I'm using AG for a reason because he's got 71 days till he's free. Yeah. But she is amazing apparently on the indies. And so what was that like, I think, to wrestle Victoria? Not wrestle with Victoria against Casey and Cat Power.
Yeah, teaming with Victoria was like a lifetime achievement for me, because she was someone who I'd watch on TV and like, oh my god, she's so cool, she's so good, like loved everything about her. So when I found out I was teaming with her, I was like freaking out. I was like, oh my god, it's Victoria, I get to team with Victoria. little like a 13-year-old me was going insane. But she's so sweet and just like the kindest person, so helpful too. Like gave so much good advice, and she just complimented me all the time. I'm like, why are you complimenting me? I'm going to be complimenting you. But yeah, like so good, and she was so good. Like she never lost a beat from when she started wrestling to when she finished. She was always consistently like great. And then of course Spinelli is Spinelli, who's just got a boatload of personality, like for enough personality for everyone in the room.
And then obviously you and Casey have had title matches, you've had tag matches with Freddie Mercurio was in there, and then he's a character in of his own right, and he is amazing. And then obviously in Femme Fatales, Smash Wrestling, Greek Town Pro Wrestling, and then just a bunch of other people have been involved in matches. Willow Nightingale's been involved in a few of these matches, I think. And so this is just one of those things where it's just like a long history of individual matches, title matches, tag matches, and everything in between. And it's kind of crazy how this has gone on and off, much like most of your other rivalries. And obviously, when you're facing somebody over 4 or 5 years, you're getting better, they're getting better, and then every other person gets interjected in it. It's such a cool experience, I would imagine, especially because this is sort of right before and when you were starting to heat up for your breakout year.
Yeah, it was she, like, again, a boatload of personality. So she was always just like helping me find ways to be more charismatic during matches, which really helpful for me because I'm a shy person. So every time she would force me to do things. I'd be like, oh, okay. And it would help. Like, it would really help me be more comfortable and come out of my shell. But yeah, like getting to wrestle someone so often and having like different scenarios with it is super helpful. It helps you get better, helps them get better, helps you get more creative because you don't want to do the same things over and over again. So you have to think of new ideas. And like she was so great. And she'd been wrestling for so much longer than me already that she was giving me so many ideas that she had wanted to do with other people but couldn't, but she could do them with me because I'm so much smaller than her. So that was always fun. Getting to play with that size difference, and like she was one of the few girls, at least at the time, that I could just jump on and do anything to, and she could catch me and I wouldn't have to worry about it. So that was always great.
Yeah, that's a thing in which men tend to be big.
Yeah.
And that's like when you see, guys doing like 450 shooting star presses, it's phenomenal. And you see a guy like Ricochet doing something, it's crazy because I don't think most men can do something like that. And it's crazy. That's all I'm going to say. And I used to do martial arts, and women can kick a lot easier than men.
Yeah.
I can say that.
Yeah, that's true.
So I'm going to leave it at that. And then there's 2 more women I want to talk about for this 2019 breakout year. And first one is Sassy Steffi.
Mm-hmm.
And she is scary as fuck sometimes. And she's been on my other show. Mm-hmm. And so obviously she's done a lot of stuff in wrestling, obviously coming out of the Midwest militia and that entire thing. And the two of you have just had victories all over, exchanging them between each other. And she is a veteran in the industry. So what was that like going up against her?
I mean, great. Like, I've been so lucky to work with so many veterans that I've been able to learn from everyone. Like, I didn't have the problem of like, I'm coming in new and everyone I'm working with is new, and I never get to work with anyone who could show me different things. But Sassy Steph, especially because she wasn't from Canada, she's from the States. She's learned how to wrestle a different way. Like a lot of Canadian girls, we kind of wrestle the same way because there's only so many schools. So we all kind of learn the same things, but getting to wrestle Steph, she's from the States. She's got a different style. She can show me some things that I've probably never seen, but that I hadn't seen before. I know I hadn't seen them before because she showed me how to do a couple of things. But she, showed me a new style, how to work with that. And just, again, like to work with someone who's got more experience is so, so helpful because it helps you learn so much.
And then the other side of Sassy Steffi, on one side of her, part of the Midwest militia, is Allison Kay, Sienna. And obviously the two of you had a bunch of matches with each other. And one of the matches that sort of kicked off, I think, this and changed a lot of people's perspective was that strap match.
Yes. I love that strap match.
Brutal match. A strap match in general is a pretty brutal match. And so what was that like? Because obviously you're going up against AK-47, and she can be a monster in a lot of ways and be very vicious. And she's done almost everything in wrestling at this point. You know, it's her and Lufisto who have done everything in wrestling. And a few other women have that as well. But that's crazy because you're still fairly new. You're going up against somebody who is definitely killing it, and you're in a pretty brutal match with her. And it was a pretty intense match.
Yeah, I think, did we go all over the arena with that one? I think we did.
I think you did too. I think you went pretty far with it.
I can't remember if it was that match, but I think she almost threw me over like the balcony, or tried to. But that was an intense match. Like, I remember being very nervous leading up to it, just watching all different strap matches leading up to it, trying to think of cool things to do. And of course, like, strap matches are pretty brutal. Like, we used a real leather strap. Like, it hurt to get hit with a lot. It left a lot of marks on us. So it was a lot of like, okay, like, is she gonna be okay if I do this? Is she gonna be okay if we try and like do this? And she was totally cool with everything. I was totally cool with everything. We just beat the crap out of each other. And it was so much fun to do such a different match. Like, I don't know, I'm the only person I know that's ever had a strap match, like, personally, at least. Like, I haven't met anyone else who's had one.
They are not really used in the Northeast. They're used down more in the South and in the Midwest tremendously. That stuff is just used down there, and it's used to settle a lot of grudges. And I find that strap matches are more culturally utilized that way.
Yeah.
WWE had one, I think, once in like 4 years at an NXT show for a reason, because, well, you know, they're only used when your opponent's ducking out of you indefinitely, and you need a way how to hold your opponent. Same thing with dog collar matches, you know.
Yeah.
It's definitely utilized in a particular fashion. And they could be very intense in a lot of ways. And so I don't really know what prompted you to want to be in a strap match, but, you know, especially with somebody who was extremely hardcore like Sienna is. So but to each their own. But I do think it is important to talk about it, because this sort of, that it was the preheater, because I think it was towards the back end of 2018.
Yes.
And then,
well,
2000. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was mid 2018. But yeah, like, that was definitely the start of when I started, you know, gaining some traction, gaining some steam, starting to really do things.
Yeah, so let's talk about this, because 2019 was that gain year, and obviously Chris Stratlander was, I think, one of the first matches of 2019 that you had. I don't know if she just signed, was about to sign with AEW. There was rumors of it at that point, but obviously, what was that like? Because she came sort of out of nowhere in a lot of ways, and I don't think people were expecting her to be signed. And she got signed. I saw her wrestle like 5 times, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh wow, I got to see, you know, her wrestle 5 times on an indie show, and now she's signed to a major national promotion that's a global promotion. So what was that match like? Because this was sort of a beyond Greektown, like, sponsoring type thing.
Yeah.
So very cool on that front.
Yeah, it was cool, because I'd heard her name, I hadn't seen her work, so like leading up to it, I was watching her matches. I'm like, oh damn, she's really good. I'm like, why haven't I ever seen her before? And then we had the match, went great. Like, it's one of my favorite matches to look back at. And yeah, and then like not too much later than that, she had gotten signed, so it was really cool to be like, oh my god, like, it's like we had a killer match and she signed, and like, again, it was one of those things like, it's possible to make it sort of deal. Like, it feels like it can actually happen to you.
And then continuing on this path, you also got to face Jazz for the NWA 2 out of 3 falls match, and I think there was a second match a little bit later on with her as well. And so, what was this like? Because Jazz is a legend in wrestling. Obviously, it's 2 out of 3 falls. And so it's a little bit more of a competitive match. There's a little bit more strategy going into the match. And then you have that NWA stuff going on with it too. And it's for a title. And obviously this was sort of what was going on here, where you're now in a very cool position as far as sort of having your breakout year, for lack of a better word. I've been saying it all throughout. It's pretty clear that 2019 was that.
It really was, because I think I first wrestled her December of 2018, and then the 2 out of 3 was in, I think, March of 2019. But like, I remember the first time we wrestled, I was just starstruck. It was just didn't feel real almost. It was like, this is someone, again, who I'd watched as a kid and looked up to and thought was just this cool, badass woman that could beat up anyone. And now I'm wrestling her for the NWA Women's Championship. Like, it didn't feel real. And then we had the match, went great. And then the 2 out of 3 falls match was just, again, like, it didn't feel real. I'm like, I'm doing this again. Like, I'm getting to wrestle for the NWA title again. Like, and I'm not signed there. So it's not like I'm expected to, but it's just this opportunity that I'm being given that I was nervous about because I wasn't sure if I totally earned it, but I felt reassured after the match with Jazz that like I'd had, and like I felt like I could do it, and I did sort of one of those, like, it was just one of those like feeling like I belong moments where, because you do feel unsure sometimes. You're like, oh, am I doing well? Like, am I not? Am I doing everything right? Am this right for me? Am I at this level that I should be at, that everyone else is at around me? And I felt like after that I really was, that I had hit that point that like, okay, I know I can do this. I know what I'm good at. I can hang with Jazz. How many people can say they pinned Jazz while she was the NWA Women's Champion? Because I did. I mean, didn't win the match, but I still did.
So to even talk about this, because it is interesting when you get to wrestle people who are legends, because it is instant qualification and instant verification. In a lot of ways, it is important that you get those opportunities, and that whether you win the match or not, even putting on a good match and also having the trust of promotions, because it's the idea that they feel comfortable enough to put you in a spot where you're able now to say, okay, they feel comfortable and NWA feels comfortable that you could represent them, whether you're winning the title or not. Anytime you're in a title match, it's obviously a representation of that company. And so obviously, what is that like for you? Because a lot of ways it says, hey, we trust you. We trust that you can put on a good match. We think that you can do this, and that, we're not going to put you in something that we don't feel is not going to be good representation of our company. And so it's very important in a lot of ways. And all of 2019 was like that for you.
Yeah, a lot of people put a lot of trust in me, and very quickly. And I felt super unsure. I'm like, oh gosh, like, where is this coming from? Like, why is everyone suddenly trusting me to do this? And again, that came probably because I wasn't watching my matches back. I wasn't seeing what I was doing. But it was super nerve-wracking at first, because again, like, so many people put so much faith in me. Like Greektown did with putting me with Jazz, and the NWA did just letting me compete for the title. Crossbody, I came in and almost immediately, like after a couple of shows, won their women's belt that they had just debuted, and they just had. I'm so thankful they had so much faith in me to represent their women's division that they were starting.
And then obviously Impact Wrestling.
Yeah.
That's what they want. And then obviously coming into that, and how did that even come about? Because that's sort of the big one that I think everybody knows and everybody sort of caught you on. Mm-hmm. And they might have been going through Canada, I think, and doing a little tour in Canada for a while. So that also might have helped as well.
Yeah, I just gotten a call. I'd gotten a call. I'm like, hey, they asked, do you want to be one of Sue's bridesmaids? Like, yeah, sure, why not? That's fun. So drove down to Windsor, was a bridesmaid, talked to a couple people backstage, got a call a couple months later. These are the days we're taping. Do you want to come out? I think they're in Toronto. That's when I wrestled Jordan Grace for Impact. Everything went well. Talked to a couple people. It's basically the same thing over, and every time there was a taping, I'd get a call. These are the days. Come on down. There'll be something for you.
And so what was that like? Because obviously Impact at that time was starting to sort of pivot in a lot of ways and become, a very competitive company. They were on Twitch, and it was very accessible at that time, which was very cool. So they were on TV, and they were also streaming on Twitch, which is awesome. And it was beyond accessible. And then you're now facing, Kiera Hogan and Madison Rayne, with Jordan Grace teaming up with them. You're teaming up with Rosemary and Jordan Grace to face Kiera Hogan, Madison Rayne, and Taya Valkyrie. And obviously the Rough Rider thing, which is very Canadian. Tessa, Jordan Grace, Jessica Havoc. I might have just ruined a lot of stuff. And also against like Josh Alexander and Trey. And I forget the other two who were involved in that match on the guys' side of it. But that's not the point. And then obviously, and then it must have been very cool for you because now you're on TV and now you're doing a lot of stuff. Obviously, it's old school Impact too, which is awesome. And so, what was that entire experience like of saying, hey, now I'm on TV 6, 7, 8 times, and I'm in front of a much larger audience, and people know who I am now, and they're starting to recognize between all these matches that were, I guess, pre-taped and later put elsewhere, and now I'm on a national company, and then, well, obviously, this sort of led into Beyond and being on uncharted territory, which also got a lot of people later on. So,
yeah, it was a little overwhelming. Sorry, I think my internet cut for a second. It was overwhelming for sure. Like it was a lot at once, especially because it was just, I had done the tapings and I had my matches, and then sort of, weekly I'm on TV for like a brief period, and it was so brand new to me. It was something I wasn't used to. Even being there backstage, seeing the setup, seeing all the cameras, everything that went into being on a televised, like a internationally televised wrestling show. It's so much more different than an independent show. And I'm so grateful that Impact gave me those opportunities and, kept bringing me in for them, because I learned so much. It's such a different experience wrestling in front of just a regular live crowd, like independent crowd, compared to a televised show. There's so much more involved.
Or even something that's streaming, like an uncharted territory, because an uncharted territory is very much, it's a very different, what is it, the White Eagle Hall, I want to say, or like something like that. And I'm sure I'm going to get flack for it when
I wrestled there, and I'm not sure of the name, so it's fun.
But it's such a different crowd where I don't know if you were backstage the entire time, but every show starts off the same way, where the crowd's singing the "Whoa" song. And I'm planning to go back up when things open up again, and Beyond is running, because I'm in Connecticut. It's not that far up to where they're at, and it's supposed to be a crazy environment. And from the fan base, and even the fact that there's all these people watching. And I don't have the actual numbers, but I know that it's more than 10,000 people watching on IWTV, and it's almost a cult following. Like every Wednesday when I think it was at, and they moved to Thursdays, and then obviously season 3 is probably going to come back sooner rather than later. It is such a different environment. So what was that like? Because that's similar to Impact in a lot of ways, the way that show is run.
Yeah, and that was so last minute. Like I think maybe, not even a week before, I was asked, somebody, I can't remember who it was, somebody couldn't make it. So I was just asked to, hey, can you hop in a car with, I think it was Ethan Page and Kobe Durst, and just, come on down. Like, yeah, sure. Okay, cool. And like I had seen the uncharted territory, but I was like, I had no idea what I was truly getting myself into until I was backstage, hearing the crowd, really experiencing it live. Because it's an experience when you're there at that show live. It truly is.
Was this the show that Ethan Page basically said, hey, to Josh Briggs, Johnny Impact says hi?
I think it was. I'm pretty sure it was.
That was a great episode of Uncharted Territory. It was either that one or it was a little bit later. I forget which one it was, but it was one of those crazy circumstances. And I'm like, oh snap! It was great. What happened? And I think Josh Briggs like booted him in the head.
It sounds familiar. Yeah, it was. Yeah, like I said, crazy experience. I got to wrestle someone who I'd never wrestled before, never would have even crossed paths with had I not gotten that opportunity. So it was so cool, so much fun. I'd love to do it again. Hopefully with things opening back up, I can do it again sometime soon.
And then we're sort of counting 2020 as a wash. So I think it's pretty safe to say that 2020 has been a disaster. But there are a few more things I want to mention, because obviously there's 2 sort of title things, and then we're going to talk about some Backyard Pro. Obviously, Femme Fatales, you and Nicole Savoy going at it, and obviously I think the title became vacant. I'm not exactly sure the whole circumstances with that. And then, well, the 2 of you were basically fighting for the title, and you wound up getting that title. I think you're the 20th title holder, I want to say.
Something like that.
Around that number.
Around there, yeah.
There's been all these women who have held the title, obviously. a lot of Canadian women, a lot of people who have done a lot of cool stuff in wrestling. And so what was that like, wrestling Nicole? Because obviously having a victory, because Nicole Savoy is an amazing wrestler, and then also capturing this title, knowing all these women have held it.
Yeah, it felt surreal. Like Femme to me is like Canadian Shimmer almost. It's where all like the best women's wrestlers go to in Canada. When they come in from the States, they come in from other countries too, the UK, Japan, Mexico. That's where they come to Canada to wrestle, and like just the best women's wrestlers. Even being in the locker room, like every time I'm at a Femme show, I'm overwhelmed with the amount of talent that's there. And when we get to that point, because Mercedes Martinez was the champion, and she got signed, so she had to vacate the title. That's when the match, I had never lost a match at Femme, so that's when I was put against Nicole, who was Mercedes picked, and that's how the match sort of came about.
And so obviously there's a lot of history here, and there's a lot of storylines being involved, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's now kind of, okay, Mercedes pick his axe, you never lost something, this title means something, the last champion is Mercedes Martinez, and then there's just been, there's a whole bunch of people who held that belt. And so now it's, okay, these are sort of the two best women in the company to some degree, and who's holding this belt, a type of deal. And it's very important when that happens, because not all the time that happens in wrestling.
No, it was like it. I don't know how to describe it, because I remember being backstage that day and looking around. I like seeing Lufisto, who's just a living legend, seeing Ivelisse, seeing Jessica Havoc, seeing just Willow Nightingale. Actually, was Willow? I can't remember if Willow was on the show, but I know the Sea Stars were, and Veda Scott, someone who I've wrestled a handful of times, and just chatting with her backstage, and Priscilla Kelly was there, and just like all these women. And I'm in the main event. I'm the one wrestling for the title. And especially the venue that it's at. It's at the C4 venue in Ottawa, which is somewhere where I wrestle a lot. I usually do like multi-man matches at C4 with all the guys. So it's a building I'm comfortable with. I love being in. It was such a good feeling, but it's such a strange feeling. It felt like I don't know. It felt like before I went into the match, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I should be in the main. I feel like I'm taking someone else's spot. After the match, I felt sort of, I guess, vindicated. I felt like I had earned it, because everything went well, and just like hearing the crowd's reactions throughout the match, hearing their reaction to the end, like to the finish, and getting I got a standing ovation. I'm like, I was not expecting that at all. It was so cool. It was overwhelming. Like it felt like I had finally really done something. This title has so much history. So many great women have held it. Like it felt incredible. I did I cried a bit. That's how crazy it was to be that I'm the one holding this.
So to even go further into this, because you never lost a match in Femme. And so now the question becomes is that I don't think you've had a title match. You might have had a few, actually, now that I think, but I'm not too sure. I'm really
I think I was supposed to, and then everything got shut down.
But the idea is that at some point you're going to have a title defense. You haven't lost it, so it becomes a question. And I was speaking with Billy Starks last night, and I made the joke that she's defending her girl fight title right now. That it's a Roman Reigns situation where it's when you become dominant, you never lost a match. It's who's going to beat you to make it meaningful, and it must be very cool for you because you're in a situation, whether it was intended or not, is not the point anymore. It's the idea that whoever beats you obviously is going to carry more significance now because you haven't ever lost a match, and that's going to be your first loss of that title unless you wind up getting signed somewhere and have to vacate it, which could very well happen because everybody's getting signed on the indies apparently across the board in every indie sector. Right now, everybody's getting signed, and so it's kind of crazy. So what is that like to be in that situation where that's now on the table? Because whenever you drop that title, it's going to be way more meaningful for whoever picks it up, and it's going to give them a boost.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about because it's, who is that person going to be? Is it going to be someone new coming in? Is it going to be a legend like Lufisto who I've never gotten the chance to wrestle her. So if I finally get to and it's for the title, I'd be stoked. I'd love to defend against her. But it's a weird situation for me to be in because I've never been the dominant person in anything. I mean, I'm 4'10", 120 pounds. I'm not dominant at all. I'm tiny. So it's a weird situation for myself just because it's not a way that I see myself. But it's also cool at the same time to know that, I'm the girl. I'm the top in that company. It's a cool place to be.
I would imagine. And then speaking about championship belts, you have another championship belt as well right now, and it's the BW Women's title. And Jody Threat's making her tour in the U.S. right now, all over the place. And obviously, she was just in No Peace Underground last Sunday night. And well, you beat her for that. So what was that like? Because Jody Threat's been around for a while now as well, and we don't want to send her back.
Yeah, no, she's doing great. Like I'm so happy for her getting to see everything she gets to do. She's so lucky to be able to have getting into the States first of all, and just be able to like kill it every single time she wrestles. She's getting so good. Um, it was fun. Like every time we were supposed to wrestle at Barrie, one of us couldn't make it. So it was always like, okay, we're gonna have a match, and then either she couldn't make it, or I couldn't make it, or someone was sick, or someone was hurt. So it was just a lot of like rescheduling. I think it was like exactly a year to the day that we were supposed to have the match that we finally did. And at that point, it had become such a big deal that it was a 2 out of 3 falls match, with the final fall, I believe, being a tables match. So that was.
And so, what is that like to have all that stuff, or was it a door? Because
it was a door, but that's because we couldn't find a table.
That's because tables are really expensive. I could go to Home Depot in the States and buy a bunch of doors for pretty cheap. It's when I get out of my parents' house, I'm buying like 5 cinder blocks and building a desk door, and it's going to be phenomenal. It's going to be the greatest thing. I put Effie Lives on it, and hopefully he won't sue me. So there you go. But anyhow, I'll put Fear Effie Lives, and I'll be good to go. But anyhow, even that idea of just having weapon matches, what is that like? Because obviously you've done the strap match. I think you've had a few other matches with weapons. And then also it is important when you have, a final fall, you have a traditional wrestling match, you have some other match, and then, going through a door, it's kind of makes it more important in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for me, it's scarier because in terms of like super hardcore wrestling, I like half watch. I watch with my eyes closed. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of blood. So like a lot of especially like Japanese death matches, like my wrestler, like, a lot of my friends that are wrestlers love them. I just kind of like sit there like this.
You would not make it in ICW.
Oh God, no, I would not.
No Peace or H2O in that match, and all that.
I've got maybe one death match in me ever, but that's it. No, nothing past that. Weapons to me they're intense. It's not a typical wrestling match. They're but to me, a weapons match is a big match. It's bigger than average. It's going to be more intense than the normal match. So having that be the final fall was pretty huge because we're going to do something big. We're going to make it meaningful. And oh gosh, yeah, like that whole experience, it was so much fun, especially to work with Jody. Like I got to work with her one of her first matches, and just to see how much she's grown, especially from when we started working together to that point, was so great. And now she's just incredible.
And then obviously I want to table that, and I do want to talk about your third championship, and obviously that's Backyard Pro, and this is more cinematic, by definition. It's all on YouTube, I think. So I think most of it is free, if not all of it's free, which is nice because obviously wrestling, whether you're watching on cable, Title Match Network, WWE Network, Fight has a network thing, and a bunch of other companies do as well. IWTV, if I didn't already mention it. It's nice to actually, wrestling is sometimes free too. And so how did you get involved in this? Because you're a detective cookie dough in this. So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, Backyard Pro, there's a wrestler named Von Vertigo from Ontario, and he's a creative genius. He is the godfather of Backyard Pro. He was in the UK when the pandemic started, came over. He had his UK tour cut I think cut in half completely. Like he had just started and then was forced to come back here. And he we were all kind of bummed out that we couldn't wrestle, and he was just so determined to like create something that would keep us wrestling and entertain people. So he came up with Backyard Pro, where basically it's fully trained wrestlers that come up with different characters and just have cinematic backyard matches, but like almost like an SNL parody style of like a backyard match. Like we make fun of it as much as we can, but it's also like a love letter to backyard wrestling at the same time.
And so there's a lot of stuff that happens. So a lot of people are involved, I think, Mark Wheeler's involved. I think Jay Wheeler's involved. I think Scooter McGavin, Josh Alexander from Impact is involved, which it helps to add a lot of credibility. Obviously, you're involved. And so what is that like? Because I would imagine this is shot part in piecemeal. It's probably all shot at the same time or relatively around the same time. And then it's sort of edited because it's obviously premiered versus live. Mm-hmm. And so what was this entire experience like doing it? I don't know if you've seen Camp Leapfrog, but Camp Leapfrog is done almost at somebody's house.
Yeah.
It's kind of great how it's done. And so what was this like being a part of this? And then we're going to talk about the matches. I think you were involved in 2 or 3 of them.
Yeah. It's been so much fun. Like in terms of filming wise, it's been hard. Like honestly, my credit, like Von Vertigo is again, like the godfather, the genius of Backyard Pro. He films almost everything. He edits almost everything himself. Like he books almost everything. Like he is the true genius. But like because just due to COVID restrictions, most of our matches, like I think almost all of them are filmed on different days in different yards at different places. Like we're constantly traveling around just to see where, what's a good spot, finding out whose house we can film at, just to sort of fit in with the restrictions that we're working with. But yeah, like it kind of helped in a way because it gave for different opportunities. Like my first match was at a cottage, so we had a lake. And then we had a pool battle royal, I don't know if there's ever been one before, but we somehow pulled that off. We've done just like weird, funny, crazy things, and filming them is so much fun because we're all friends. We all get along, and getting to see everyone do these different characters is hilarious. Like getting to see everyone push out of their comfort zones. The dancing weapon always makes me laugh. I never get over how funny he looks in those see-through black pants. It makes my day every time.
And so to talk about this, because obviously you had a match surrounding the lake, and then you had the pool battle royale, and that involved a bunch of people, and obviously the winner got to fight for the BYP title, and obviously you won that. And so what was that like? Because obviously you're in a pool, and there's a pool involved, and water's involved, and all sorts of stuff like that, and getting to do something like that, because cinematic wrestling has had a lot of fun stuff happen in it. And it's the idea that it's kind of a crazy concept, but also, if you can't do cinematic wrestling in a regular wrestling show, and there's real advantages to doing it because you can't, run a show and have a pool in it. It just doesn't work.
Yeah,
so what was that match like, being involved in the pool battle royale? Because it's kind of crazy, and it's a fun thing when you watch it, and you actually buy into this. I guess you suspend belief for a little bit. Is the type of thing how I view cinematic wrestling. It's kind of very cool with that. So what was that entire match like? Then we're going to talk about the match that followed that one. A whole different match.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and like we didn't realize how potentially dangerous it was until we did it, because we're just tossing each other into a pool. I tossed Kyle McKenzie into a pool with his hands handcuffed behind him, not even thinking like, oh, maybe he won't be able to swim. And like we're just chucking each other in, and like I think Adam Safe went in on a bike, and we're like, we had to make sure the bike didn't fall in at the same time. So there was a lot of hazards we didn't anticipate. But again, like,
what is that like? Because obviously things can go wrong in wrestling, and making sure the bike doesn't go in, and making sure that, hate to say it, but there's been plenty of people who died in pools because they dove into 4 feet of water. So and I say this, obviously nobody got hurt, I'm assuming in this, but something could go wrong in wrestling in general. And then when you add other things like pools in there, well, it could be rough in a lot of ways.
Yeah, it was a good, like, experience, because we learned like, okay, like these are things that we can do and things that will actually work. Um, and it's like, thankfully, because it was a cinematic match, we had the cuts that we could, something happened, we could stop, make sure everything was okay, keep going. Like that was really beneficial for that match, especially because, you don't realize how dangerous a pool could be until you're fighting in one and throwing each other into it. And, some gun almost hits their head off the side of the pool and is like literally like within an inch of knocking themselves out.
And then obviously you win this match. A lot of shenanigans happen. A lot of people are involved in it. And then you got to challenge Jay Wheeler for his title, for the BYP title. And this was cinematic. And so what was this match like? Because you come in and you're almost in like hockey, baseball gear. and then I'm assuming that there's no rules per se of disqualifications. And then he comes out to a makeshift disastrous band, which is brilliant on his part. And you're fighting, and then you're going all over, and then obviously I think either he speared you or you speared him into a pool, and then you're both in the pool. And then it's like you almost drowned him. And then he comes back as being undead. It's an insane match in so many ways. And so, what was even like the mentality and just saying, "Hey, how far can we go with this?"
Yeah, we had talked about it a lot because like me and Gabriel Fuerza is his not backyard name, but we were really good friends. So we had talked about it a lot. Like, what can we do? Like how far can we go in this match? And the show itself was called Last Backyard on the Left, taken from a horror movie, which for some reason I can't remember the name of.
And then there's a podcast.
There's a podcast. Last podcast on Last House on the Left. Yeah, there we go. But he wanted to take that horror vibe and run with it. So I'm like, okay, cool. That's where we got the inspiration to do the spear into the pool. I think that he's drowned. He comes back as Jason. We literally ripped off the end of the first Friday the 13th movie. But yeah, like we really wanted to push it because we call it backyard rules, which basically means there are no rules. It's whatever we decide in the moment. So we had full creative freedom to do whatever we wanted, and that's what we did. And I mean, it was so much fun to do. I think at one point I taser him in a shed, and then I carry him with a wheelbarrow. We did a lot in that match, but I mean, everything worked. Nothing felt out of place. It all flowed together in the end, which was like our biggest thing was like, is this going to make sense at the end? Like we're doing so many dumb things. Like, is it all going to make sense? And it did, which was the best part. So we were happy that we could tell a story. It made sense, as wacky and crazy and funny as we had. Even the ref, like there was one point where he was supposed to be counting a pin and he was peeing, not paying attention at all. So,
and so obviously you win this title, and well, this title looks like something else,
just a little bit.
And that's what makes it even funnier in so many ways. And you could spin the title apparently. Yeah. And then the best part of this is that there's all these Instagram photos of you with the title. And I like how there's similar Instagram pictures with you, your BWP title, or your BW title, and your Fatale's title as well. And so what is this like? Because the funniest pictures are the ones with you in the title, obviously wearing the hat, done in black and white. And so what is this like being this champ? Because is there going to be a season 3? Like that's what I want to know.
So we're actually in the middle of season 3. The final episode of season 3 airs tomorrow night, which I'm stoked about because that's when I get to defend my title. So we filmed season 3. It's been on the past couple of weeks. You can always, again, go back on YouTube, check them out. Totally free. We made sure everything was totally free to watch. We wanted people to enjoy something during the pandemic, just make people smile. That was our goal. If they wanted to contribute with a GoFundMe, they could have, but free access regardless. So I will be defending it tomorrow night on YouTube at 8:00. And it's a crazy thing. Like, it's weird to be like, oh, I'm the Backyard Pro Champion, and I just, it's a spinner belt. And I really just duct tape my name on there. It's great. It looks real professional. I love it. But it's a cool thing to be the champion of. Like, we created this little fun show that in a way we kind of did for ourselves, but to have a following and like people that actually really watch it and enjoy it, it's a cool thing to do.
And so to even go off of this, because obviously this is a product out of the COVID era.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned it a few times and we spoke briefly off air about this, is that you're in Canada, for those who don't know. And it's this idea that, well, Canada is really going on and off. It's good for 2 weeks and then you're off for 2 weeks and then you're fine for the next week and then it's not working on. And it's obviously, I think, safe to say, it messes up a lot of bookings. It messes up a lot of things from business-wise. I have a lot of friends in comics and who are up in Canada, and, well, things are crazy there. So obviously doing something like this, it's not going away so quickly, because doing a cinematic match and a cinematic promotion is a hell of a lot easier probably when you're shut down for 2 weeks and no events can occur, to do something and then obviously getting back. So where do you find that cinematic wrestling is going? Because there's a lot of discussions going on in wrestling communities right now where people are saying it's going to die out or it's here to stay.
Mm-hmm. I think in the right capacity, it can stay. Like, I do think like the Boneyard match was a great example of a cinematic match. The Firefly Funhouse match with Bray Wyatt and John Cena, great cinematic match. There's definitely times where it's overkill, I will admit. But like with what we do with Backyard Pro, it's meant to be a parody. We are parodying what real backyard wrestling is. So in that way, I feel like cinematic wrestling is perfect for that sort of avenue, and something that didn't really exist before the pandemic. And I do think it's a cool thing to have. Like, it's a different style of wrestling. There's different types of wrestling. There's like I can barely watch hardcore wrestling because the sight of that much blood kind of freaks me out.
You have to face your fears.
Yeah, you got to face your fears sometimes, but I don't want to face it that much though. I'm not gonna be honest. But I do think it's it's a different avenue. It's a fun avenue. It's something different. There's so many genres to wrestling, and I do think that cinematic style is a good genre to have. It's a good option to have too, especially, knock on wood, if something ever close to a pandemic happens again, have that to fall back on.
It will. There's no question about it. I have not to alarm anybody. I think we're good for another 5 years, but it's coming. No question about it. I'm just saying. I'm very pessimistic, which means I'm always right eventually. And I'd rather be right than wrong. Unless three rights, you got to make a left. That's a different discussion completely as well. But even going off of this, where do you even think, because this, I guess, sort of the same question, slightly different, is that where do you even think the future of wrestling is going? Because obviously I think cinematic is here to stay, in my view. Mm-hmm. But where do you think it's all going with this pandemic? Because obviously the model has shown faults and it's shown cracks. And clearly things get fucked up, for lack of a better word. And it's clear that, people are now coming into the States from Canada, but people weren't allowed to come in from Japan. People aren't allowed to come in from Australia. Mm-hmm. And it's evident that, and even still, the rest of the world is messed up. And the biggest countries that messed up right now is India. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how big of a population wrestling-wise India has, but that's just one example that while certain countries are doing better than others, the world is still pretty messed up from all of this stuff. So there's clear issues when you're dealing with wrestling, which is very global right now. So I'm curious where you think it's going. And even from like a safety standpoint, attendance standpoint, fans as well, and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. I do think, I'm excited to see fans back in arenas. To me, I don't like seeing, the Thunderdome, I wasn't a huge fan of it just because the screens to me were distracting. I didn't feel like there was any fans there, even though you could see them. It just didn't feel genuine to me. I like real, having the fans there, getting those reactions. To me, that's wrestling. And obviously with the pandemic at the point that it was at in the States, earlier with Thunderdome, you couldn't have that. Now, I guess things are starting to open up. You can. I do think that this pandemic has shown that, being able to, be online and streamed and be visible to so many people and really get out there on different platforms is super important in wrestling.
Oh,
Because
it's
if,
beyond important.
yeah, like to just
There's a
like
great
think about,
digitalization pivot going on right now, and it's not going to stop if companies like Shopify, Amazon, e-commerce is bigger than ever, and it's more important. And e-commerce is just not buying your crayons from Amazon. And yes,
yeah.
I have crayons from Amazon, but that's not the point. It's streaming is e-commerce in a lot of ways. But continue.
Yeah, like streaming to me is the future of wrestling. Like I do think there's only with the limited that you can do in person, especially the limited travel, especially right now, like how many places can't, how many people can't leave the countries they're in right now still. I think streaming is the way to go because you can have everyone in that country still wrestle. You don't have to leave, and just a way to showcase it globally. And the best way to do that is through streaming.
And I think there's more money in streaming than anything else. I think that, most venues in wrestling can hold, 500 people at the most?
Yeah, about that.
Especially on the indies. And
Yeah.
even big places. I mean, Worcester Hall or White Eagle Hall and beyond holds, maybe 150 people at the most?
Yeah, and
There's,
it's crammed.
and there's like 10,000, if not 20,000, if not 30,000 people watching, on IWTV. Where's the real money in that promotion? I think it's safe to say. And also, furthermore, I mean, there's been a bunch of shows that I've watched that were just taped and then edited later and uploaded onto IWTV. And where's the real money for that promotion? Well, you can get a nice gate, and the gate can cover a lot of stuff. If I'm running a promotion, and may or may not, the real money for me is going to be in the streaming. It's not going to be in the gate. The gate's going to help cover 85% of the cost. The way I'm going to make, or it's going to put me at $0 or $1,000 over into the black, the real money is going to be the streaming.
Yeah.
And so that's how I view it at the very least.
Yeah, I agree. Like streaming is definitely the future. And like another thing that I think will start to happen more and more is a lot of companies working together. Like we saw with the Collective, just a lot of different companies working together, putting on a bunch of different putting on shows together, doing a whole weekend. I think that's going to be more common, especially with all the restrictions, like the travel restrictions, that sort of thing. Because it helps everybody.
It's economic because if you want to fly somebody out from California and they're going to be on 4 shows for 4 different promotions, all of those companies chip in.
Yeah.
Because it's different now if somebody's flight is $600 and it costs each of those promotions $150 to get them brought in from an airfare position. And then, they're staying 3 nights in, a hotel or somebody's house down there. It's much cheaper for everybody involved versus bringing in somebody for 1 show. And having that and having one promotion carry the bulk of it. So obviously it's much easier on them as well. And so when you have there's just a big wrestling weekend. It's 8 shows in 3 days.
Yeah.
Insane. And so there's a lot of stuff going on. But anyway, speaking for about an hour and 15 minutes, so I don't want to keep you here all night. But I do want to give you a chance to self-promote yourself. So where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at It's Alexia Nicole, on Instagram at Alexia Nicole. I have links to all my merch, my pro wrestling tees, my own merch store on there. And yes, those are my only 2 socials. I always have to think back and make sure that's what I've got. But yeah, Twitter, It's Alexia Nicole, Instagram, Alexia Nicole.
And I think I put a bunch of those links up above. And so obviously I think I put a bunch of those links up above as far as your merch goes. I don't think I put your Instagram link up there. I don't think I put your Twitter's right down below. I think people can find that pretty easily. It's right in the title. Obviously, my Twitter is also on my title, so you can go bother me there. And I've been saying it for a lot now, and I'm going to keep saying it, is you have to support indie. And what that means is you have to support indie content creators, which means you got to buy their merch. So that's shirts, 8x10s, wristbands. I don't know what else you have. Used gear. That's a big one now.
Used gear, yeah.
You're actually going to their shows. That's a big one. When there's live shows, going to them if you're in the vicinity. I don't expect somebody who is in California to fly into Ontario, Canada, but if it's streaming on IWTV or somebody's wrestling on Impact or beyond, tweeting at them is very, very important because it actually lets the promoter know, hey, we like this wrestler. It's good for them, engagement, algorithms, all that stuff. So there's a variety of ways how to support independent wrestlers. You could also buy me a coffee. My link's up there too. Definitely appreciate it. It is a website that is much like Patreon. So you could go do it. It's just that you don't get charged monthly for it. So you could go check that out if you're interested. If you're not, I encourage everybody to share this interview because that also is super, super important as well. And obviously on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Oh, man. Thank you for having me. This is fun to talk about. I haven't talked about like my early career in a while, so it was good to look back at.
Everybody goes the other way. Everybody goes the other way.
Yeah, everyone goes the other way. They don't want to. But it was cool to talk about and like really look back at like the women I've worked with, because I never sit back and think about it, but I have worked with a lot of talented, like high level.
There's only 9 of them.
Yeah.
Your career is like 170 matches, and those 9 or 10 women that I mentioned make up, I think, 120 of your matches, which is insane.
Yeah.
You have a very short list of people who made up your matches, and then if we include Jordan Grace in there too, it's like 11 women have legitimately made 130 of your matches, which is ludicrous. Yeah. It's mind-boggling. Just go through cage match. If you don't believe me, just go through it one by one, and you'll start figuring it out. Oh, it's phenomenal.
But yeah, I'm excited for things to open up again, for wrestling to come back. I'm hurt right now, unfortunately, so I can't wrestle till the end of the year, but I'm excited to see everyone get to wrestle again, go out and support them. Like, I'm going to do everything I can until I get back in the ring. Just to make sure everyone else.
This was the year to get hurt. I'll tell you that. Yeah. not that you want to ever get hurt, but this is totally.
No, this was definitely the time.
Because this is 2020 and 2021 are what is known as a down year.
Yeah.
In a lot of people's stuff, it's the time to. I'm going to use an analogy that people might not like, but with a gun, you cock the hammer. Mm-hmm. And you remove the safety and cock the hammer. This is that year where it's time to cock the hammer and remove your safety, because 2022, it's coming. So obviously, things are coming in 2022. It's probably going to move up to spot number 50, hopefully, on the PWI. And we can only hope. We can only hope, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can only hope.
And so on that note, I think we covered a lot of stuff. I didn't cover 1/10 of your career. And so we're going to have to probably do this at another point and probably do it another 9 times so you get everything covered in that regard. But I do want to thank you for being on, and I think that is a wrap.
Good. Thank you for having me again. It was a lot of fun.